Hi everyone, welcome back to Lifting the Lamp. This is my second video on jealousy, and in this video I'll be focusing on all of the ways that you can apprehend those really negative feelings of jealousy that can chew you up inside, to transform them into something positive that can really inspire you and motivate you to become something greater and to achieve more in life. So once we've identified jealousy, we understand how negative it is, we can begin to look at our own life and think about ways in which we might be in danger of becoming jealous, and ways that we can stop that feeling before it even begins and transform it into something else. And in order to do that, we first need to understand that there's really one of two ways that we can abandon jealousy. The first is by getting over what is often called Fomo, the fear of missing out, realizing how trivial and silly that mentality is. And the second way is by turning what would have been a feeling of jealousy instead into a feeling of aspiration. So to deal with the first issue, the issue of FOMO, as it's often called in modern parlance, there's this phenomenon of FOMO these days, which has always existed in some form but seems to be more prevalent now, where we want something that somebody else has simply because they have it. We see a person, they have a thing, or they're in a particular situation, and they're happy, it makes them happy, and we think that we would be happy if we could be like that person and have what they have. But that's really a wrong way of looking at things. The first reason why that's not a good way of looking at things is because everybody is on a different path, and what one person has might not be what's best for you. So it's always important to keep that in mind. We live in a really superficial society where people spend so much time on social media looking at other people's lives instead of going outside and having their own lived experiences and discovering themselves. And so they don't know who they are, and they think that they should just be imitating other people and trying to get or want what other people have, instead of figuring out who they are and what they want. You may find that you can't get that thing because it's not suited to you, to who you are as a person. But when you really find yourself, find what your own tendencies are, your own compulsions, your own passions, your own ikigai, as the Japanese expression goes, you'll find that that thing comes naturally to you, and that thing is the thing that brings you joy. And so there was no need to be jealous of that other person, because why would you want something they have when it's going to bring you less joy than what you can already gain more easily? Another way of overcoming this FOMO, this feeling of wanting what other people have, is to realize that so much of the things that we think that we want or that we think are important in this life aren't important at all. This is kind of the Buddhist idea of non-attachment and not grasping at things. And it's particularly relevant to our modern materialistic society. We have to have so much before we're fulfilled. And if we don't have that, we feel like there's something wrong with us. We're not keeping up with the Joneses, as it were. And we see other people have things, and we are jealous of them for having more stuff than us. But do you really need the latest iPhone 13 if you've already got a smartphone? Is there really a reason for you to be jealous of somebody who does have that when you don't? Do you really need the biggest Jeep? Do you really need the biggest house? The biggest paycheck? I mean, do you really need those things? The answer is no, you don't. They are all meaningless. And all they serve to do is serve as status symbols in a fake, artificial reality that we have created around ourselves in what we call society. And it's not going to bring you fulfillment. True fulfillment comes from looking within and being comfortable with yourself. You know, there is a certain amount of things that we need to have to fulfill our basic needs in life, but all of this rubbish does not fit in that category. So just realize that you don't need it and stop wanting it. And then you won't be jealous of people for having material things that you don't have. But of course, there are also situations in life where we want something because it is really something worth having. And there is some reason why we want that thing that relates to the fulfillment of our life purpose, which we have discovered to some extent, or to just make sure that we can live a happy and comfortable life. And in those situations, we can become jealous of people who have hit that milestone, who we see have hit that milestone while we're still struggling to get there. So what is a way that you can reframe that situation to avoid jealousy? Well, the way to do that is to look at that person who has achieved something that you haven't, and turn them into a role model. Make that person a person that you want to emulate because you recognize that they have been successful and they must have started at least a comparable place to where you are now, if not the same. But they did something to help them get where they are. So what can you do to be more like that person? To make their success your success. And then when you have that mentality, you will suddenly see that attitude transform. That attitude that could develop into jealousy transform. Suddenly, rather than you wanting to see the other person fail and you resenting another person for having something that you don't, suddenly you're invested in that person having more than you, having the thing that you want, because it means that you too can accomplish that thing if only you put in the work. And even if they have certain advantages that you don't, there will be some things that you can learn, that you can put into practice to bring yourself closer to that goal. And you might not end up in the same place that that person's in, but every person's journey is their own journey anyway. So don't worry about it. But you know, if I didn't have this mindset at this point in my life, I would be a very jealous person indeed, because you know, I've been doing this YouTube channel now for almost a year. I've been making videos. You know, my subscribers still only number in the hundreds, and that's fine. It's a niche market that I'm appealing to, and it's very early days. But as I've been perusing YouTube, I've noticed that there's certain spiritual YouTubers that have quite a large following. People in the niche that I'm appealing to the most, who have 100 times the followers that I have. Other spiritual YouTubers who have followers numbering in the hundreds of thousands or even over 1 million. So just hugely successful. And if I was jealous of those people, then I would have a really miserable life. And it would make the path that I'm on that much harder. But I haven't been jealous of these people for the reasons I just outlined, because it means, great, here's a person who has already done what I'm trying to do. That means that I can do the same thing too. And as I research these people's channels, I find inevitably that they have been doing this for so many more years than I have. And so it's not surprising that they're more successful in that regard. And perhaps there's things about their videos that they're more slick, or they appeal to things that people are more interested in, that mean that they're more successful. And those are all things that I can learn from as well. And if I didn't have those people and their success as an example, it would actually be harder for me to succeed. See, we don't have to resent people who have more than us. We can be happy for people who have more than us. We can take pleasure in other people's pleasure. We used to understand that as a society, but we seem to have forgotten it. We've become so individualistic that if it's not mine, it can't exist. If it's not my success, it can't exist. And then we tear people down instead of trying to improve ourselves, instead of trying to better ourselves. We want to stay where we are, and we don't want anybody to be doing better than us. So when you have that sense of entitlement and you have that attitude, the only thing that you can do to make your situation better is tear people down. But if you have an attitude instead that goes beyond what the ego wants, that instead understands that what benefits one person can bring benefits to all of us, suddenly instead of wanting to tear people down, you want to build them up. And you want to raise yourself up to be more like that person. If we see greatness in a person, if we see something exceptional in a person, that is something that needs to be cultivated. That person needs to be allowed to flourish, because it'll bring benefits to the entire society that they live in. Instead, we don't do that. We just want to tear down greatness and reduce everything to the lowest common denominator. That is what our society is becoming. And it's a real tragedy. That's why we can't produce any more great stories. We just regurgitate the same superficial narratives over and over again. And what greatness there is needs to be torn down and demolished and criticized, but never replaced with anything better. And that is a recipe for disaster. So let's start celebrating each other's achievements again. Let's start building each other up again. And let's slay the green-eyed monster. Thanks again for listening. I hope you enjoyed this video. Don't forget to leave your comments down below. Subscribe if you support what I'm doing. And I'll see you next time.